Okay, so we're going to take a look at this Placeable Colors script by ThundR. I need to go to his website, thunderfs.itch.io. I'll put a link in the description to this. And basically what this does is expand on the placeable colors, obviously. The way Giants have it set up is that you are somewhat limited on the way you can actually have colors change on your placeables because they limit the actual keystrokes to just N and M in the actual F1 menu in game. Even though you could potentially have multiple objects change color, they will change color together. So as you press N or M, depending on which way you want to go through the color swatch, if you like, or color selection, um, they will all change together. So, there's no way to single out certain parts of the object that I know of base game, which is why most of them don't, well, in all the ones I've looked at, they will either have the main building change color or just a door or just a single part of the mod, the object, change color. You won't have multiple parts of the building change color. Like, for example, the Rudel Hoffman large cow barn, the main building surround changes color, but the roof, the doors, everything else stays the same. That you can't change those. Now, again, theoretically, you could set them up to change color, but they would change color with with everything else. There's no way base game to split those parts up so they can be controlled individually. That's what this script by ThundR does. It actually expands on that to give you multiple options within the game to select certain parts and change those colors individually. So you for example, this, you would be able to change the roof separate to the sides, the doors separate to everything else, and so on and so on. And you have this new change color selection in the menu with the left shift N and M, and then you basically cycle through those different objects or parts of the object to then change them individually. So that's what I'm going to look at here. I've already downloaded the script and everything and had a bit of a look through it and gone through some different parts. There is an XML, an example XML that we'll be looking at and everything else. So when you download it, it says name your price, but it is free. You just click download and it will give you a option here to donate. If you so choose to do so, then do so. Otherwise, you just click no thanks, just take me to the download, which will take you to this site here. You just click download and download it. Easy peasy, right? Once you've got it downloaded, I've extracted it, so you will end up with this particular file, which I've already put in my mods directory, which will be the th placeable colors. If you extract that, so for me, I just right click it. I've got 7-zip, so I just use 7-zip, extract to, and whatever, and you'll end up with this. Inside of here, you go into the SDK folder, and there's an example XML. So if we go through this very quickly, it's showing you a simple placeable, which is what I'm going to be working with here, just a in-game decorative shed, which I'm going to take out and create a mod of it. I've already done this, so to actually understand how all of this works. So I have a version of it already, but I'm going to recreate that from scratch. So I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. Now you have the option to have shared colors. So no matter what parts you have, they will all use this shared colors section, even though you can individually color whatever parts you have. They will all refer to this shared color section to get those particular colors. If you have a specific color, uh, swatch, whatever you want to call it, like red, blue, green, for example, that you want to limit an area to. So, for example, if you want the roof to ignore the shared colors and just have it use a specific set of colors, you can also do that by using this use shared false attribute, and that will then limit it to a specific set of colors. So for example, here we have, or in the example, we have color scale 0, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 are using the shared color section, whereas color scale 0 is just using these 3 colors. So basically it's going to limit what the roof tin will be able to use. This could be quite good in a way that a roof potentially might not necessarily be a specific color, so you can limit the roof to only use those certain colors, or whatever you want it to be, whether it be the door, whatever. So you can limit certain areas to only use a group of colors or a selection of colors, where everything else will just use the shared colors, and then they'll have more options available, for example. So we'll be referring to this quite a lot to get the information from there. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to open up, let's see, what can I do here? Yeah, let's go into the Giants, the farming simulator installation folder. So mine's on my D drive, so we'll go to 22 data, placeables, lizard. I'm going to use the garden sheds. I'm going to use level 05 here, so I'm just going to go into here. And what I will do is create a new mod. So I'm just going to go in here, new folder, and I'll just do fs22 underscore garden shed. And maybe what I'll do here is actually call it color selectable, whatever, doesn't matter, just a name of a folder, right? So in here, what I will do is let's see what I can do. I might possibly export this out into here and call it something else. Or do I just drag it? Difficult to know sometimes what the best option is. Maybe I'll just do this way. So if I open this in the Giants editor, what I'll do is I'll just do file. Let's do export all with files. We'll go to the desktop, go into my folder, and I'm just going to call this garden shed, okay? And then we'll just click save. Do you want to get the parent directory structure? Let's see. Actually, I'm going to click no to that. Do you want to keep the game relative paths? No. Let's click no to that as well. Okay. Let's close that down, and we'll close that down. Might need to go back into there actually. I'm just trying to see what we've got here. So shared, don't need any of that. I don't need the shaders. I don't need that either. So first of all then, let's delete all of that because I don't need any of that stuff. I'm going to probably use maybe some of the textures. And what I will actually do here, let's go back into this one and placeables, lizard, garden sheds, level 05, and I'm going to just drag this XML in here, copy that like so. Okay, so if I go into here, we should have, what have we got? Okay, that didn't really work the way I wanted it to work, did it? Because it's now linking all of this stuff in here, and I don't want it to be linked here. Okay, that's fine. We might need to make a few changes here then. So let's do dollar data. Let's do that. Let's copy that, paste there. We'll just paste this onto here because I'm pretty sure dollar data maps textures. That's going to point me back into here. Data maps and then textures, and then the shared folder for all the props and everything else and whatever else needs to be, snow and so forth. So that should be fine. And then the actual textures here, We'll leave those as they are, I think. I'm definitely going to be adjusting the diffuse, but the normal and specular we might actually need to, we might just leave that as it is. But for now, I'm just going to leave it where it is. That's fine. So we'll go ahead and save that. And I'm just going to, let's open this and make sure that it actually does open and in the editor without any errors. Which according to this, we have no errors. That's awesome. Okay, so if we go into the visuals, garden shed, we'll have a look at this. So we've got a garden shed, right? It's exactly the same as the in-game one, no problems, all exactly the same. What we need to do though is actually export this out to get it into Blender, because of the way the UV maps need to be relocated to work with the colors, and we also need to separate these parts out, because if I go back to the example XML here, we have a node set up. So each one of these is set to a node and they are i3D mapped. So we can't have it as one object because it needs to be, we need to link those parts correctly by their index. So we'll need to separate those parts out as well. They can share the same material, which is great, but they need to be separated parts. So what we're going to do then, let's take this, I'll just copy the name and we'll export this out as a OBJ. So we'll create a new folder. I'm just going to call this shed, and we'll call this shed. Doesn't matter what the name is. And we're going to export this out as a wavefront OBJ. Okay. We're going to go ahead and save that. Then we can close that down. And yeah, let's close all of that down. I'm going to open up Blender. I'm using 3.6.1, but you can use anything 2.93 and above. Primarily because the Giants i3D exporter is created, or at least the official one, on the Giants Developer Network. I'll put a link in the description. You do need to create an account, but it is free. Once you've created the account, you'll get an email with a password, and you can then just log in, go to the downloads page and download the Giants i3D exporter. Pretty straightforward. And then you just need to install it. If you've never installed this before, from what I remember, when you get the download, you run the download and it will then give you the option to install or extract to zip file. Now the way I always do it is extract to zip file. You can put that wherever you want, on your desktop for example. Once you've got that, and the reason why I do that is because when I've tried to install it using the executable file, it doesn't always install for whatever reason. It says it's completed, but when you come back in here, it's not actually here. So the way I do it is extract to the zip file, put the zip file on your desktop, and you just go edit, preferences, add-ons, and then just click install, go to your desktop, locate the zip file, highlight it, click install add-on, and it'll install. Once it's installed, what you need to do, you'll get this. You just need to put a tick in the box and then save your preferences. If you have autosave preferences turned on, which I believe it is by default, you don't need to save your preferences as it will do it for you. But I like to save mine manually, so I have that turned off and just make sure then it forces me to save my preferences every time as I make changes. Because I've got a lot of different add-ons, I turn them off or deactivate them, activate them as I need them, sort of thing sometimes. So I like to have the function or the feature of saving my preference manually, but it's entirely up to you. So once you've done that and it's either auto-saved or you manually save your preferences, you can close that down. And then in your end panel, you will have this new tab, which will be the Giants i3D exporter. Make sure this is all installed and showing up first before you continue. If you haven't got this, then there's no point in going any further. Make sure this is actually installed and all working. So once you've got that, we can then import the OBJ file. So we're going to go File, Import, Wavefront OBJ. We go to the desktop, go into our folder, highlight the OBJ file and click Import, and we'll get our shed. Great. Now, first of all, what I'm going to do, let me turn on some screencast keys, which is another add-on, but you won't need this to do the actual process. This is just so you can see what buttons I'm pressing. Once you've got your shed installed, open up your N panel here. So N on the keyboard opens this up. Go to Item, and you'll see that you have an X rotation of 90 degrees. This is because in the Giants editor, very similar to the way it works in Maya, the Y-axis is up and down, but in Blender, the Z-axis is up and down. So the way that it gets it into Blender is it does some magic in the background to zero out the Y and the Z axis, but by doing that it automatically then has to give it a rotation of 90 on the X so that the actual object is the right way up. Otherwise it would be like that, which is of no good to nobody. So but we don't want it to be like this, because when we export it back out again, although the object will be the right way up, the gizmo will be upside down in the Giants editor. So what you want to do here before you go any further is to apply the rotation so that it puts the keeps the object at the right orientation, but puts the X rotation to 0. So we're going to do Control A to open up the apply menu, and we're just going to click rotation, and this will keep the orientation of the object correct, but it will zero out the X rotation for us, and that's what we want. Okay, so once we've got to that part, what we need to do then is separate these pieces out. And this can be a bit tricky sometimes with objects. Now, one thing I will say about the Giants objects, they are very well designed. So, you know, we're already on a winner here. So the way that I do this is to go into edit mode. So we're going to go object mode to edit mode. And we're going to select everything with A, and then press M to merge the vertices by distance. This will remove any overlapping vertices, because any object that's exported from, whether it be Maya, Blender, or whatever else, in most cases, if it's designed for a game engine, it will automatically triangulate the mesh, and also it will do, which is somewhat of an older method but still works today, it will do an edge split, which basically creates additional vertices, overlapping vertices, and this can make it quite difficult to work on the model if you don't merge the vertices. Now sometimes that can be a bad thing, because when you merge vertices, if they are intersecting with other parts of the mesh, you may end up merging verts that you actually don't want to merge, and then it will become quite difficult to split parts out. But as I said, the Giants models are very, very well designed, so I've never had any issues so far by merging verts and working with it that way. So we merge the vertices first of all, and then as I've mentioned, game engines like to work with triangles, but Blender is a quad-based 3D modeling software. It likes to work with quads primarily. It can work with n-gons and triangles, but it likes to work with quads most of all. So what I generally do is I convert the triangles you can see here. This is a triangle and this is a triangle. I like to convert these to quads. So with everything selected, we go to face and go tries to quads, shortcut key Alt-J. So we'll just click here, and what that will do is remove any triangles it's capable of doing so. Now, there are times when in creating the object, Boolean operations may have been used through modifiers or whatever else. Some geometry, if it's been created from an n-gon, it just, to keep the geometry intact, it can't remove those triangles, because those triangles are the only thing that are holding it together in its current form. So it will do its best to try to convert those triangles back to quads, but in some cases that's not always possible without collapsing geometry. So you might find that in some cases, like for example here, we still have triangles, and that's just because of the way that the geometry is created. It cannot remove those triangles without potentially collapsing the geometry. So we just have to work with those as they are, but which is fine. That's no big deal. And again, like up here, we have triangles because you know, we have extruded geometry, and to keep the geometry from collapsing, it requires those triangles. So it will do, like I say, it's the best it can to convert the triangles back to quads, but in some cases it cannot do that because it will break the geometry or collapse it. So but what we've got here, that's perfectly fine, no problem. So what we need to do then is determine what parts of the model we want to be color selectable. Now, because this particular object has a diffuse texture on it, we're going to run into some other problems, but we'll cover those, or I will cover that when we get to it. Now, potentially what you could do is remove the diffuse texture altogether, but in this particular scenario, the diffuse texture also contains certain other information, where normally you would have an object like this. If I go back into here and open it back up in the Giants editor, it would be using the building shader, but because this doesn't have any extra functionality, it's just using the placeable shader. And all that is doing is adding in the snow effect, so that you will get certain parts of the object that will, you know, be covered in snow. Now we do have some additional objects here, like the snow on the roof and the icicles and stuff like that. But the placeable shader is adding the effect of, you know, weathering. So when it snows, it will actually have sort of parts that will display snow on it as well that aren't covered by these extra objects. That's just controlled by the placeable shader. So we're going to be replacing that placeable shader with the building shader because there is no variation in the placeable shader for color scale. So we need to use the building shader to get that variation to make all of this work. Okay, there is a bit more to it than that, which we'll go through as well. But just wanted to point that out, that we will be switching to a different shader to make this work. So yeah, with all of that in mind then, what we can do then is we're first of all determine what parts you want color selectable, so and how you want that to be controlled. So I'm going to have the door here as one piece, which will be color selectable. Then the main frame will be another color selectable item, and the roof will be another color selectable item. Okay, and this is all possible using ThundR's script. Without that, this would not be possible. As I've possibly already mentioned, as I've done this video many times, I'm not sure what I have mentioned and not mentioned, but if I haven't mentioned it already, base game, you could have multiple objects or multiple parts of the object color selectable, but they would all be controlled together. There's no way to separate them, and that's what ThundR's script does. It gives you the option to choose individual objects or individual parts of the object to make them color selectable on an individual basis. Hopefully I'm explaining that correctly, or you know, to a way that can be understood. Yes, so what I'm going to do then is break this up somewhat. So first of all then, I'm going to take the base here, which would be normally just like a concrete base. So I'm going to go into edit mode. Now I have lots of add-ons. I'll try not to use them. So if I go object mode to edit mode, I'm going to go into face selection. So here we have vertices, edges and faces. So I'm going to go into face select, and with the cursor here over the base area, I'm just going to press L, which will do a select linked, or select linked, which basically is selecting any adjoining parts of that part of the model. So if I press G and move this, I can see that that is now moving with all of it. Okay, so that's good. And I'm going to separate that piece out. So I'm just going to press P and separate it by selection. I'm going to go back into object mode. And then if I select that part just on its own, that is now a separate object, which we can see in the outliner. So what I would recommend here is to rename these so they make sense. So we've got this one, which I'm just going to rename. So we'll do double click on that, and again, you can call this whatever you want. So I'm just going to call it concrete base. Okay. And then I'm going to hide that so it's not in the way anymore. And then we'll select some other parts. So let's select it again in object mode. We're going to switch to edit mode in face selection. And again, I'm just going to press L to do select linked. And I'm just going to press L enough times here that I'm going to select all the parts that I want as the roof. Okay, which is pretty much that. So that's what we want for the roof. And again, here what I'm just going to do is press P and separate by selection. So we'll go back to object mode, select just the roof, and I'm going to rename that. So we'll double click if it works. Sometimes I have some issues with the double click when I'm using OBS. So instead what I'll do is I'll press F2 to bring up the object name panel here, and I can just rename that. So I'm just going to call it roof. Okay, and I'll hide that as well. And then I want to do the door. There's going to be a slightly different way of doing this. So I'm going to select the main object here, switch into edit mode with face select, and I'm going to select the top panel here and then control select the bottom, and that will do a shortest path selection, which will get me all of the door pieces. Okay, which is what I want. Fantastic. So we've got all of those. That's great. And again, I'm just going to do P and separate by selection. We'll go back to object mode, select the door, and I can just rename that. So we'll do F2 and we'll do door and rename it to that. Okay. So now we've got all of our parts separated out how we want them to be. We need to work on some extra pieces here. So I'll bring all that back. So I've got the base, which is just going to be as is because we don't want that color selectable. That's just going to be concrete as it is using the information from the diffuse texture. Obviously the door, the roof and the shed piece are not. They are going to be, well, they will, but they're going to be slightly different because the problem we're going to run into is because we have this diffuse texture here, it's already got color in it. And if we then use that color with the color selectability, this will act as a mask. So if I have green as a color selection, the green from the diffuse will also be masked into it as well. So it will make it a very dark green. It will actually make everything look really dark, and we don't want that. So we're going to be changing some parts here within this texture to make it not dark, I guess. But that will come later on, but I just want to make you aware of that. There's going to be quite a lot of editing we're going to need to do here to different things to make it work correctly. Now, obviously, if you're building something from scratch, you won't need to make these edits because you will make your textures appropriate for the color selectability to work right off the bat. But we're going to need to make some changes, or need to make some changes to the texture that we already have to make all of this work correctly. So I'm going to give this a material. So we're going to select any piece of this, doesn't really matter. And we'll go to the material tab here in the properties panel, and we're going to add a material. So I'm just going to keep this real simple. We'll just call it shed underscore matte, right? Doesn't matter. And then what I want to do is shift select everything and copy that material to all the other selected parts. So now all of these will share the same material. Okay. So when I apply the texture to one, it will apply it to all of them in the Giants editor, that is. And then what I need to do is actually move some of the UV islands to get them into the correct places. But before we do that, the building shader requires a second UV map because unlike the placeable shader, which, as I've already said, doesn't have the color scale variant, the way that the building shader works is instead of having the dirt, moss, rust, and various other different things like that baked into the diffuse texture, they are controlled through the building shader. So you would normally have some other texture controlling the main colors, and then the building shader would have a second UV map, which would have a second texture, which would control the dirt, moss, and the ambient occlusion. Now we're going to do this slightly different because that information, some of the information is already baked into the diffuse texture. We don't need that to be baked or applied again, because again we will end up with dark spots where we don't want them to be. So what I'm going to do is just create a second UV map. So we're going to come to the object data properties here, and we have a single UV map for all of these currently. What I'm going to be doing is creating a second UV map for the fact that the building shader requires it. That's the only reason. I'm not going to be doing anything extra with it. I just need it because if I don't put it in there, if I don't add it, the building shader will not apply. It will throw an error. So what I generally do here is I rename the UV maps. So the first one I'm going to rename to UV map 0. Then I'm going to click the plus to create a new one and then put UV map 1. And I'm going to do that for all of these. So we'll just do UV map 0, create a new one, and then UV map 1. Okay. Now potentially what I could have done here, what I probably should have done, is created this before I separated all the parts, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't take long to do. So we're just going to come through these and UV map 0, create a new one with the plus, and then add another one here, UV map 1. Okay. So we need to make sure that we're on UV map 0 for all of these, because that is what controls the UVs for the color selectability. So we'll go back through all of these and make sure we're on UV map 0. Now for the concrete base, it doesn't matter so much because that's not going to be color selectable, but we may as well just do it for all of them. And that'll be fine. So concrete base, as I said, we can ignore. The door, we're going to go to that one first. And if I then switch to edit mode here and then press A to select everything. Now the way I have my blender set up, I don't use the preset windows, but I'll just add the UV editing one back in so you can see what you will have on your version. And you can see here we have under the UV editing tab this window. So this is my layout window. This is my UV editing window, which will be the same as yours. You can see now we have UV islands for the door. Okay. Now because I want the door, all of the door, to be color selectable, the way that Giants do this, any overlapping UVs, they move to one side for the most part. But we want them to be all in the same place in this instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these UV islands. If I turn on the UV sync selection and deselect everything with Alt A, if I select these, you can see that's some of them and that's the rest of them. But I want these to all be in the same place. So I know that this is 2 units over. So I'm going to go GX 2 negative, and that will put it back in the correct place where all the others are. So now these will all be in the right location. But that's not the final place it needs to be color selectable. It needs to be to the left of the UV grid. So now with all of them selected, I need to go GX 1 negative. And now that will be in the correct position for the color selectability to work correctly. Okay, so anything on the grid or to the right of the grid will not be color selectable. Anything to the left of the grid will be color selectable. Now, placement of the UVs is very important to remember where you've put them for later on, because you will need to actually set that up and assign it correctly in the XML, which again we will get to when we get to that part. So far that's the door done. Okay, so let's go back to the layout and we'll continue on here. So now if I go to the roof and go into edit mode, okay, select everything with A, I'm going to go to the UV editing, and you can see we have the same thing again, making sure that we are on UV map 0, very important. I'm going to box select all of these and move them back onto the grid. So I'm going to go GX2 negative, which will put them all back on the grid. And like before, they also need to be moved over again to the left of the grid. But now that they are all on the grid, I can move them as a whole to the left. So I'm just going to go GX1 negative, and that will move them into the correct position. Okay, so that is now all done as far as that goes, but to make it work with the script, we also need to move it up one, because we can't have them all in the same location, because we're using color scale 0, color scale 1 and color scale 2 in this particular case. Or is it, I think it's 0, yeah, 0, 1 and 2, that's correct. Because it's all using the same material, if we had them all using separate materials, so if I applied a different material to each of these objects, I could put them all in 0 in this particular location. But because they are sharing the same material, they do need to be in different locations here. So we're going to also go GY1 to move them up one location here, one grid section. Okay. So now I'll go back to layout, and I can do the next part. So we'll do shed, and we're going to go into edit mode, select everything. Now in this particular case, we don't want to select the handle. We want that to be a completely separate, we don't want that to be selected in this case because of the way that the texture is going to display things. So here what I'm going to do is Shift and L to deselect all of those pieces. Okay, so we will just have all of this other stuff here selected. All right, so we're going to go back to the UV editing, and again, like we had before, we have some over here and some over here. So we want to basically put those onto the grid. So I'm going to box select all of those, GX2 negative to put them over here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is in the 3D viewport here, I'm going to deselect everything, and I'm going to go L on the handle, Control I to do an invert selection. This might sound very complicated, but it's really not. And then I need to move this over to the left. We're going to go GX1 negative. And like before, we need to move it up. So we've already used 0 and we've already used 1. So now we're going to go GY2. Okay. But the door handle itself is still on the grid. We need that to stay where it is. Otherwise things won't work correctly. They won't be displayed correctly. So if I then go back into object mode here, I'm just going to select all of these parts, ignoring the concrete base. So I'm going to select the door, shift select the shed, and then I'm going to go into edit mode and select everything. And you can see now we have all of these parts in the right location. So that's the door, that's the roof, and that's the shed part. But the door handle itself is still on the grid, which is where we need it to be, right? And remembering this is all done under UV map 0. Very important that it's all done under UV map 0. So if I deselect everything, let's go back into object mode, and we then go to here. If I switch over to UV map 1 quickly and go into edit mode, you can see it's in its original location. I'm just doing this quick to show you. If I select the roof, go into edit mode, you can see under UV map 1 it's in its original location. If I go to the shed and go into edit mode, UV map, it's in its original location, and that's on UV map 1, which is fine. That's where we want it to be, on UV map 1. But UV map 0 is the one we're concerned with on UV, moving the islands to get them into the correct location for the color selectability to work. Okay, so now that we've got all of those parts set up, let's see, what would be the best thing to do here? Now I could just export it out as is, or I could put it into, I may put this into a empty so that it's contained. I'm not sure. Might have a bit of a play with that, or a little bit of a think. I think what I will do here is let's do Shift A and we'll create an empty plain axes. Okay, I'm going to rename this, so let's just do F2 and we'll call this shared color selectable. Okay, now what I'm going to do is parent everything to that. So I'm just going to highlight all of these. So we'll shift select all of those. So I just clicked on the first one, left shift, and then clicked on the last one to select it all. And then I'm going to control select the empty in the outliner, control P, and set parent to object. And that will put it all inside of the empty. So now when I move the empty, everything moves together. Okay. But everything inside of here is still as it was before, which is what we want. Now Blender will arrange these in alphabetical order, so we may need to move some of these around when I get it into the Giants editor, but that's fine, we can do that, that's no problem. Now I always like to update the mesh data because we have object data, which is the primary name here, but we also have mesh data, and I like to always update that, or as it's known here, object data properties, but this is mesh data. So the shed is okay. The roof, we need to change that one, so we can just drag in and drop. So we're basically copying and pasting the object name and overwriting the mesh name. So we're just literally dragging and dropping. So it's very, very quick to do. So it may as well be done as it's that quick. You know, so why not do it? If it's a quick operation, I always think just get on and do it kind of thing. Let's make sure we are on UV map 0. Not that it really matters, but I always like to do that anyway. So now we have all of those parts in the correct locations. We have our material assigned to everything, which is great. Awesome. Okay, so now what I can do then is export this out. So what I'll do here is I'll probably just take the name from here. We'll just copy that. And we're going to right click on the empty and select the hierarchy. Okay, which will select all of the parts inside the empty. We're going to press N to open up the side panel, and we're going to go to the Giants i3D exporter. All of this stuff here leave as default, and we're just going to uncheck the use blender file name and go to the browse folder. I'm going to go to my desktop, go into my shed folder, and I'm just going to paste that into here. So we've got shed color selectable. Set the i3D name, which will link it in, and then we're just going to go export selected. Okay, and if it says successful and gives you a time, you know that everything's worked okay. So we're going to minimize that one down. We're going to open this one up and go into here. Okay, so now we have our shed i3D and i3D shapes, which is great. So I can go into here, and what I'm going to do is bring this into here. So I'm just going to open this one up in the Giants editor, like so. We'll expand this out, go to the visuals. I click on this and F to focus. What I will do is Control L to bring in a light so we can just see what's going on. And I'm just going to import. So I'm just going to click Import i3D file. And this is our shed. So we're just going to double click that and bring it in. Now, one thing, for whatever reason, when you create a parent-child hierarchy in Blender, it brings in two of them. It doubles them for some reason. All you do is just delete the additional one. Doesn't matter. So all we're going to do now is just drag this up with the middle mouse button to put it in the correct location. Okay. And that's all you need to do there, really. So what we can possibly do here, Just thinking what would be the best way to do this. What I might do is, so that we don't end up with, does it really matter? Probably not actually, no, we'll just leave it as it is, that's fine, doesn't matter. So we want to set this up as the same, so the clip distance here is 150. So I'm just going to basically take that and then overwrite all of these, so it sets the clip distance to 150. Now I know you can do all of this within Blender. In the actual i3D exporter, you can go to the attributes and you can set all this stuff up in here and whatever else, but to be honest with you, the time it takes you to do it in there, you can just do it in the Giants editor anyway. So, you know, it is what it is, right? We also need to turn on cast and receive shadows for all of these. So we're going to just do that. Cast and receive shadows. Okay. Perfect. So that is now all of that set up. And then what I'm going to do, I can actually delete the original. I don't need that one anymore. And I'm going to then go through and apply the material, the textures. So as I've got the textures on my desktop in the folder, I'm just going to use those. But if you wanted to link it back to the in-game ones, you could do. But I am going to be changing some things in the albedo texture or diffuse texture because of the way that it will work, and I'll try and show you that here. So if I link my ones in, so let's just go to this one here. We have our diffuse, and we have gloss map, the specular, and also the normal. Okay, we now have all of our textures reapplied, and it looks exactly the same as it did, or exactly the same as the original, which is important. You need to make sure that it gives you that. If it doesn't, then something's gone awry and you need to go back in and change something. You've put the UV islands in the wrong place or whatever else. So when you're moving your UV islands, it's very important to actually move it as I've done it by pressing G and then actually moving it by one UV grid square as a whole. Sorry, I might have just bumped the microphone there. But trying to move them manually is you know, by actually selecting them and then trying to move them in here by selecting them and then just doing like this, you're never going to get it in the right place. So always do it like G and then do 1 and move it that way, however it needs to be, like, because you're moving an entire grid section then, which is what you need to do. Okay, but we have what we want here so far. So what we need to do now then is set this up to so it will actually be recognized as a color selectable object. Okay, now as far as the concrete base goes, that's not necessarily important. So here possibly what I would do is just add in the placeable shader, because it doesn't need to be anything else. So we can just add the placeable shader to there and then just leave the variation to none. But as far as the door and everything else goes, we need to use the building shader. Now, one thing we will run into a problem here is because they all share the same material, when you apply a shader to one object, it will apply it to all of them. I just wanted to point that out. So if you are going to do it this way, then you will need to potentially have a different material for the concrete base. But as we have gone through the process of adding in a second UV map to all of the objects, we're just going to ignore that and just use the building shader for all of them. Okay. And because I haven't moved the UV islands from where they originally were, the color shading or color selectability will be ignored on the concrete base and also the door handle. So here what we can do is change the variation to color scale, and you'll see now that it actually does adapt to match. Now, because we have color within our albedo, the colors from the albedo are going to act as a mask. So whatever we have this set to, that color from the albedo will also bleed through. So you might end up with certain colors becoming very dark. Now, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If that works for you, then leave it as it is and just go with it. But you might need to adjust the color from the albedo to white to make the color selectable colors more vibrant. It just depends on the outcome that you are trying to get from it. So again, just be wary of that. Okay. We're going to go with this for now, and we'll get this working. That's the most important part. Once we have it working, we can play around with the albedo texture to adapt it to work how we want it to work, if we want it to work that way. Up to you. Right, so what we're going to do then, I'm going to move some of these around because I don't want the concrete base to be any part of this. And what I would like to have is each one of these in order of their color selectability. Okay, so if I go to the door, in the actual shader variation attributes, we're going to see what color scale is actually controlling the door. So I believe that to be color scale 0 because it's yellowy kind of color. I know when I change this, so if I was to do 1 on there, a 0 and then 0, that is actually changing to red now. So I know that that is actually going to be color scale 0. So I'm going to keep that one at the top. So the roof, we're going to go to color scale 1 and change that one. And we can see that that one is actually changing as well. Okay, which is great. So I can now change that one. And I know that's color scale 1. So they're in order of what the color scales are, which I like. And then we can do the shed, which is obviously going to be color scale 2. So if I change this one to red or whatever, that should be like, okay. So I'm just going to set all these to 1. And I know that they are in order of what they need to be, okay. Now, one advantage of having the albedo with all of the colors in it, when you set it to 1, you will end up with this as the default color, okay. And then you will just change it accordingly by pressing the appropriate keys in game. But again, like I've said, just be aware that because that color is there, it will act as a mask and bleed through into any of their color selectable colors, which can make them become very dark. So, you know, you just have to kind of figure out what you want to get out of it on that side of things. But we'll look at that as we go through it. So now that we've got all of this set up, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And what I will do then, if I minimize this down, I'm now going to go into the XML. So I don't need that anymore. And let's open up the XML, and I need to rearrange some of this stuff here. So the actual store, you could leave that pointing to wherever if you wanted to, but I'm going to actually change it so it's going to be here in my folder location. The i3D I obviously need to change because that is no longer pointing towards the in-game one, it's pointing to mine. So I need to change that as well. But I've got mine actually named as Garden Shed, just Garden Shed without the 05 on the end of it. So I need to change that to match. We're just going to remove the 05, so Garden Shed. Okay, everything else there I can leave as is for that side of things, that's fine. And then we're going to add in the color sections down the bottom here. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll go into ThundR's script folder here, go into the SDK folder and open up the example. And then we're going to take a look at this. So what I'm going to do is just use the shared colors. I'm not going to specifically limit certain sections to certain colors, but if you want to do that, it shows you how to do that here in the example. What I'm going to do is just use the shared colors. So all of the objects that I have will have access to all of these shared colors. Okay. So I'm going to take the start tag here, which is placeable colors, and I'm going to put that in here. Let's create some space and we'll paste that in, and we'll create some more space here. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the end and take the end tag. It's just the way that I do it. And we're going to paste that in here. And then we need to populate in between those start and end tags what we want to have. So I want to have the shared colors. So we're going to click the first one here and shift click all the way down to the bottom. So we have our shared colors. And I'm going to paste those in here. So we'll just click and paste. And I'm just going to create some more space with like so. And then we'll do color scale 0. And I don't want all these commented out parts, so I'm just going to take the start tag and paste that into, let's do it here. We'll create some more space. I'm going to take the end tag, color scale 0 end tag, and paste that here. And then within that, I'm going to take the node tags and all the information contained within. So we're just going to copy all of that and paste that in there. Okay, so now we can do the same with all the others. So we'll create some more space. So what I could do here is just copy all of these so I don't have to go through all this stuff, but as these don't have any additional information, I can just copy as I need. I'm just going to take these. I don't have a color scale 3. I'm just going to copy the color scale 1 and 2 sections and then paste them in here like so. Okay, and that has to be contained within the placeable colors tags. So what I will do is just take these and delete them and clean it up a little bit. So we have this set up. So we have our shared colors and then our nodes. So now we need to identify what nodes are what. So we can close that, don't need that anymore. Save that. So we're going to go back into our i3D, and here we need to take the index from here and put that into the XML. So for the door, we're going to take the index here, and we're going to actually create those. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's just make some additional lines. And what I will do then is take the names. So we've got door, roof, and shed. Let's overwrite these. So we've got door, roof, and shed. Okay. And then we need to create those i3D mapping sections down here. So we can just take any one of these, doesn't matter. So we'll just copy that and paste that in a few times. So I can do door, paste that in there, roof, paste that in there, and shed, and paste that in there. Okay, so for the door, as I said, we have got index path like so, and I can put that into there. And then the roof, we're going to take that index and paste that into there. And then this one, the shed, we're going to take that and put that into there. Now, as I've already gone over this, I'm going to go over it again because it's very important. You can see here we have color scale 0, which is controlling the door. And we need to make sure that is correct. So for door, if I come to color scale 0 and I change this and this changes, I know that I've got that set correctly. Okay, and that is being controlled by color scale 0. So all of this has to link up. It's not just about the index. The index is linking the actual part of the object, but the color scale 0 is linking that object to the shader color scale 0. So it all has to link together correctly. Not just for the i3D mapping, we're controlling how the shader is going to react within the inside the game. So we're linking not only the door mesh, the object, with our i3D mapping, we're mapping or linking the color scale part here to the correct location for the node and the attribute in the shader itself. Okay. Hopefully I've explained that in a way that you can understand. So as long as you click on the door or whatever part you've got indexed here, and under the appropriate color scale, when you change it in this shader, it adjusts here in the viewport then you've got it in the right location. You get it in the game and things don't work, you'll need to come back and obviously check that and make sure that you've got it all linked correctly. So if I go to roof, which is color scale 1, so I'm going to go to the roof under color scale 1. If I change it here, as long as the roof changes, I know I've got that linked correctly. Okay, and again, if I go to shed, under here, shed is color scale 2. So if I go to here, color scale 2, and I adjust this, and the shed changes color, then I've got it in the right location and it's all linked and mapped correctly. Okay, so far so good. So we'll delete the light and we're going to save that and close it. Don't need that anymore. So all of this is now set up correctly and linked in the appropriate places. We've added in our placeable colors, tags, and all of our shared colors in this particular scenario, and our color scales and indexes are all linked correctly for the shader. So the color scales are linked to the shader, the indexes are linked to the object, and then i3D mapped here. Okay, so far so good. Right, so let's close all of that down. We'll close that down. Let's go into this folder here. So I'm going to rename this to just garden shed. I don't need to have the 05 on here, that's fine. And I'm going to create a mod desk. So the way I do this is I go into Farming Simulator 22, SDK, maps, and it doesn't matter which one, any one of them, and you'll find a mod desk. So we can just drag and copy that into there. If I open this up, we're going to put the name in, so we'll just put in guy, that's fine. The icon, I'm actually going to change that, so it'll be underscore garden shed. Okay. The map data we don't need, so we can highlight all of that and delete it. I now need to add in the store data. So the easiest way to get that is to go back into the Farming Simulator installation, 22, data, maps, and then go into one of the maps, doesn't matter which one, and you'll find here store items. So if you open that one up, you'll have your start tag. So you copy that, and we can just paste that in and just tab that across. And what I will do is just copy that. So I'm just going to literally copy that and paste it down here, and then put in the / to create the end tag, and then inside of that we need to copy this data. So we're just going to highlight one of the lines, copy it, and then just paste it in here like so, and then tab it across. Okay, awesome. So I can close that one down, save it. Now we just need to change the file name here to link to my XML. So making sure we've got it right, so it's garden shed XML. So I'm just going to highlight all of this and type in there garden shed XML. Okay, so now that is all linked in correctly, and then what I can do is just change the stuff here if I want to. So I can say this is a color selectable shed, whatever, right? Doesn't matter, call it whatever you want. So we're going to copy that. We'll just paste it into here, doesn't matter. I'm not really bothered about the translations for this demonstration. So we've got everything we want there, so we're going to go ahead and save, close that down. We can close that down, and we're starting to get what we want here. Okay, so yeah, so now what I want then is a store icon and a mod icon, which is why I changed the name here, because when I create it using the app, let's call it an app from Giants, so you can get this on the Giants Developer Network as well. So you'll need the i3D exporter, so while you're there you may as well get this, and you'll probably need the texture tool as well, so you can get that while you're there as well. So the FS icon generator for Farming Simulator 22. So it's Farming Simulator icon generator 22. I've got version 1.0.6, which I think is the latest version. I haven't checked in a while, but make sure you get the latest version. And then we're going to basically open that one up. And if I run the program, we need to set this up. When you open this for the first time, it may not have all the information. Now, because I have my farming simulator installation on my D drive, I've had to go into here and actually click the browser, go to where it's located, and then do all that. But if you have it in the default location, this should be automatically populated with the correct location. If it isn't, just click on the little browser and then find where your farming simulator installation is. So for me, I go to D, farming simulator, and then click select folder, and it will find it and then populate it with the correct information. Wherever your Giants editor is, so you obviously need the Giants editor to do any of this. But if it doesn't automatically populate this, then you'll need to again go here and then find where it is and link all of that. And because I've done that, it's probably now going to break. So if I go to, I think it's C drive here, Giant software, and then into here, and then click select folder, and you're done. And then your mods folder path, wherever you've got your mod. So for me, it's on my desktop. So I just go here and then go to my desktop and click select folder. And once you've done that, it will automatically populate any kind of mod that is recognized by this program. Now, it will need to have a mod desk and a placeable or an XML of some kind for this to populate with that information. If it doesn't have any of those, it won't show up in here. So if it doesn't show up, you've got something wrong and you need to go back into here and obviously edit these XMLs to make it work. Once we've got all of that, we can come in here and click on this and we'll do the store icon. So we're just going to click generate. Now I know there already is a store icon that I could use, but I just want to show you all the process of everything. And it will create that for me and then convert it from a PNG to a DDS and everything else. So once you've got that one, we're going to switch to the mod icon and we're going to click generate again, because we obviously want a mod icon and a store icon, because this is a standalone placeable. I need both. So it will do all that for me like so. So I can now close that down. And we just want the DDS. So all I'm going to do here is just highlight the GIM files. We don't need that. And the PNG. Okay. And we're going to delete them. And we now have our icon and our store icon. So this is the mod icon. This is the store icon. Okay. And we have all of those. Excellent. So if I've done everything correctly here, let me close all of this down. What I will do is, let's go into my mods folder. And what I will do is I'll move the one I've already created. So I'm just going to take this one here and we'll just move it out onto the desktop like so. And then my new one here, I'm going to drag in. Okay. So this is the one I've just created with you guys in the video. And you need to have the TH Placeable Colors mod in your mods folder. Once you've downloaded it from the website I showed earlier, again, I'll put a link in the description, put it in your mods folder where you've got all your other mods and everything else. Okay, now I've been playing around with a lot of different things, so I've got mods in here that aren't relevant to this, but I will just not activate them basically. So we've got our placeable garden shed color selectable and our color selectable mod, the placeable colors mod. Okay, so I'll get into game and then we'll just check it out and make sure it all works. Hopefully it does. I'm just going to do this on Elm Creek. Doesn't really matter what map I use. I'm just going to deselect everything. We'll do the this is a color selectable shed and also the placeable colors mod. Okay, so that's the only two mods I'm going to have active. And then we're just going to click start and we'll go. And hopefully, as I said, everything will come in and show up and whatever else and work. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Now, as I've done this already a couple of times, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be kicking myself, but hopefully it will. So let's come in here, P, to come into the store, and then go to the construction tab. And we want decoration, others, and you can see my placeable shed here. If I bring that in, as I said before, by default, we have the albedo textures being displayed. Let's just see, we've got no errors. I've got the console commands turned on. We've got no errors, which is great. That's nice. So if I bring up, let me just get my camera here in a position we can see everything clearly. See if I can make this work. There we go. If I bring up the F1 menu, if the mod is all active and working, you'll see here we have left shift N and M to change the color selection, and N and M, which is the default for change color, that's base game. So if I was to do N, you can see here the door is actually changing color. Now, as I pointed out, because we still have the albedo, the colors are very dark. So we're going to work on how to fix that, but it is working. If I then do Shift and N, it will go to color selection 3, and I can now change the building. Okay, so I'm now changing the building color. Okay, if I do Shift N again, it's going to go change color selection 2, and now I'm changing the roof. So you can see from that we do have access to 3 different sets of different parts of the object, because we've split them all up, and I can now color selection how am I saying this, change the color selection of each of those parts individually from each other, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you very much, ThundR, for this awesome script, because it just adds so much more functionality over the base game. So yeah, but as I say, it is very dark because of that bleed from the albedo texture, or diffuse, however you want to say it. So what we're going to do is, in addition to this, I'm just going to Alt F4 out of that, and we're going to go back in and try and adapt the albedo texture to work better with the color selectability. And this is not the easiest thing to do. So only do this if you feel comfortable in doing it. It's not rocket science or anything like that, but it can be a bit of a pain to get it to work correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into Blender, and I'm going to use Blender to help me do this. So I'm going to go back into object mode here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select certain parts here. So I'm going to see how I can make this work. Let me go back to layout first of all, and I'm going to open up another tab. Actually, what I'll do is I'll do it this way because you'll have access to this. So I'm going to create a tab here, which you will already have, which is the shading tab. So if you go to the shading tab here, and then what we're going to do is add in the texture that I'm going to work with. So from here, I'm just going to drag it and drop it in here. This is the node editor for that we're going to work with. So this is our diffuse or albedo texture. And I'm just going to take the color point, click and drag with the left mouse button to create a noodle, and I'm going to connect that to the base color input. That's all I need to do there as far as that goes. Okay. So now if I go to the UV editing layout, you can see that adding that texture in has adapted how everything looks in here. We no longer have that square grid. We've got a different setup because the UV islands have scaled correctly to the texture that will, well, is required or was created for this particular object. Okay, so what we want to do though is work with this in a way that I can take the UV layout from Blender and use that as a guide in masking out areas of the albedo texture to make those changes. So I'm going to shift select all the parts here in the outliner that will be part of this, and then I'm going to go into actually let me go back to object mode first, and then I'm going to shift select all these parts. Then I'm going to go into edit mode. Let's see here, if I can figure this out here. what I want to do is I need to put all of these back on the grid. So I think what I will do, let's go back to object mode. Because we have our second UV map, I'm going to change over to the UV map 1 on all of these, and we'll use that instead. Okay, so changing over to UV map 1, I'm now going to shift select all the objects again, go back into edit mode. With everything selected, they will all be on the grid, which is what we want. Okay, so we need to separate this out a little bit because I don't want the handle as part of the UV layout when I export it. So what I'm going to do is Alt A to deselect everything. I'm going to do L to select the handle, Control I to select everything else, which is all of the color selectable items we have. And now with this in here, if I press A to select all of these, the only ones that I haven't got selected or shown are the ones for the handle and the concrete base. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go UV, export UV layout. Okay, so I'm going to put this on my desktop. I'm just going to leave it as it is. We don't need to select everything here, just whatever. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm going to leave it as it is. Export UV layout. Okay, so if I minimize that, what I'm going to do then is open up this texture in paint.net, and then I'm going to take my exported UV layout, drag it in and add it as a layer. Okay, so if I hide, and you need to have this open, so if you don't see this, come up here and bring up the layers tab. So I'm going to hide the main one, the background, and just have the foreground here like so. And I'm going to deselect it, and then I'm going to select the outside with the magic wand. So I'm going to come over to here, change to magic wand, and in the empty space I'm going to press L. No, I'm not going to press L. I'm getting confused between the two programs now. So with the magic wand, I'm just going to left mouse button click in the empty space. Okay, and I'm going to do Control I to highlight everything else here where the UV layout is. And then I'm actually going to bring back the background and highlight the background in the layers menu. And then I'm going to do Control C, Control N, and I'm going to create a new texture, 2048 by 1024, and hit enter. Control A and delete, because I want this to have an alpha background. And then I'm going to go edit and paste into new layer. And we will now have all of those parts as a new layer. So what we need to do now though is convert these to black and white. Okay, so I'm going to go adjustments, black and white. Okay, and then deselect, and we will end up with something like this. Okay, so now what I can do is merge that down, so we have this like so. So I'm going to go back to my original one here, and I'm going to delete it, but make sure you're on the background. That's very important. We need to be on the background when we delete it. This one here I can now delete because I no longer require that. Hopefully I'm doing this right. So we're going to come back to here. Now I have to make sure. So let's do Control A, Control C, come back to here, and we're going to go edit, paste into new layer, like so. And it will matter where these are in the actual in here where they are. So you need to make sure that you have the layer on top and then this one at the bottom. Okay, well actually I don't know if it does matter, to be honest with you. I don't think it does. No, it probably doesn't, to be honest with you. So yeah, ignore that. But I always have it this one at the top and the one at the bottom. So we've got this at the bottom, okay, and then this one at the top. But it's important that when you do this, you have the alpha where you have an empty space. So the empty space is filled in with whatever is remaining on the other texture, okay? Because otherwise you'll have blank spots in places. So now we have this. I'm going to deselect everything, and with the top one selected, I'm going to merge layer down, so we end up with this, right? So I'm going to do file, save as. We'll put it back in here, doesn't matter. So I'm just going to change this so it's garden shed underscore diffuse, and I'm going to change that to a PNG and save. Okay, and we'll minimize that down. So now what we need to do is go back into my shortcuts folder. I'm going to go into the texture tool, and I'm going to take this diffuse texture and drag that over the texture tool exe, which will convert that to a DDS with the correct parameters. And I can now delete the PNG because I no longer require that. So we now have a, if I actually close that down and reopen it again, you can see what we have. This is the texture that I'm going to be using, which is all grayscale. This is the one that we originally had with the green. Okay. So let's close that down. So what I'm going to do now then is we're going to open the i3D back up again in the editor. I'm going to change the albedo texture for this, the new texture that we just created. We go to here. I'm just going to change this from this green one to the grayscale one, like so, and click OK. Right. So now if we look at this, let's go Control L. You can see it's all grey, but it retains some of the information from the original. So it still looks like it has dirt on it and moss, and even though it's not, because the dirt and moss obviously has lost its colouring slightly because it's no longer representing dirt, it will actually still give it the effect that it has dirt and moss in certain areas, or you know, it will work best you can do it without recreating the texture from scratch and re-adding in the dirt and the moss and whatever else. Because as I've said, the dirt and moss in this particular scenario is baked into the diffuse texture. So if you wanted to do the dirt and the moss, then that's fine, you can do that however you choose to do that. But for this, just to make it work the way I want it to work, with the color selectability and some of the effects from the color from the dirt and moss and whatever else, we'll just go with this effect. Okay. So now we have this. We'll go and delete the light because I don't need that anymore. We're going to go ahead and save that. We'll just minimize it, and then we'll go back into game and we'll see how it looks now with that new texture. So back on Elm Creek again, and we're just going to deselect everything, select the shed and the placeable colors mod, and we'll start and load in the map. Okay. We now go to P, bring up the door, and we'll go to decorations, other, and select my building. You can see now it is grey. Okay, so let's get my camera in the right position. It will start off like this because that is the base color being displayed from the let me see if I can actually get my camera where the light's going to shine on this best. Not that I'm trying to make it look better than it actually is or anything, but I want it to show the colors from the light that's being displayed in game here. Let's get it to somewhere like that. Now when I bring up the F1 menu, you can see we're on color change selection 1, which is the door. So when I do N, you can see we have this effect, which looks much better than the original because it's not as dark as what we had before. Okay, so we can go through those. If I do Shift and M, we're going to go to color selection 2, and you can see now that changes color. Okay, and it will cycle through all of those. Shift M again, and we can then change the color of the main building. Okay, and then we can just click and place, and we'll go over to the building, and we now have our shed with all of the different colors. So we have a different color door, different color this, different color roof, and so on and so on. And I think that looks pretty good. It's come out quite well. So, you know, changing that albedo with the black and white, making it grayscale, helps make the color selectable colors pop a little bit clearer. They're not quite so dark, because as I said before, using the original albedo color, because it already has green in it, it will then just act as a mask upon the color selectable colors and make them even darker. So we don't want that, obviously. So because of the way this was originally created, we can't remove the diffuse color completely, because then we will remove the concrete base color and also the handle, which is obviously black with the silver bolts, screws, whatever. So we can't delete it completely, because we still need that information there. But by masking it out, like I've shown with the UV layout, we can kind of cut and paste some bits and convert it to a grayscale, and then paste them back into the original, and we end up with something like this. So now if I go back into here again, decoration, others, and choose my shed, by default again it will be like this. So if you want it to be all grey, you could obviously do that. So here we can change the colors. So we'll do that one, and then Shift M and change this color to something like, I don't know, red, whatever. Shift M, and then we can change this one to something like that. Okay, now we have a different color shed again. So, you know, now it gives us options to you know, have exactly the same shed down but in a different color, which I think is absolutely amazing. And even more amazing, we can you know, using ThundR's script, have a model with individual controllability. So each part of that model, even though we have had to split parts out and, you know, do all sorts of magic, all of this is still using one material and the same textures. So there's no change there. We have just had to separate the parts out to individual pieces, and then obviously move the UV islands into various different places, create a second UV map because the building shader requires it, even though we are not using it. So, you know, to take it a step further, I could now create my own mask for dirt and moss if I wanted to, and then have that controlled through the building shader as well. But I'm not going to do that, because obviously that's going to take a lot of time, and the video is already over an hour long. But hopefully what I've shown here points you in the right direction to get a placeable with multiple color selectable parts. Okay, thanks very much for watching. I'm sure Wizard, I'll catch you on the next one.